Hello, I'm Frost, and welcome to my beginner's guides for Dual Universe. In this episode, we're going to be building our first factory using crafting and industry. Welcome back. So you've probably reached the stage where you've figured out how to use your nanocrafter, which you access with the K key, and you've worked out how to build various items, for example, like nitron fuel, and you either have to then put all the various elements into the nanocrafter first, or get them out of a container, put them into your inventory, and craft something. So obviously, this is great for just small items and simple items, but once you get into the more complex elements, or you need to build a lot of stuff, then it's just no longer practical. And so that's when we come to building our own factory. So what I've got here is a starter factory, and what we're going to do is we're going to walk around the factory. I'm going to show you what all the various industry elements are, how you connect everything together, and hopefully along the way a few tips and tricks as well to help you get yourself organized. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump out of my little seat here. Here we go, and spin around, and we can just drop into our factory. All right, so before we start describing what everything is, essentially what we have are these assembly lines, which are these items here. So this is the extra small one right here, and then you have the small one here, you have the medium here, and then you have the large, and then there's an extra large. But at this stage, at the beginning stage, you really don't need the extra large. Even the large is a bit of a luxury, and we'll come on to that in a minute. So the main thing is that these assembly lines will then produce all the elements that you require, whether that be wings or ailerons for your ships, to building more refineries and more particular items like containers for your factory, right up to atmospheric engines and things like that. Now, the way that it works is that each size of assembly line only produces a certain type of item. And just because you've got a small assembly line, it does not mean it can build what this extra small assembly line can build. So you still have to have one of these if you get yourself the bigger version. So for example, if we look at this one, it can build small adjusters and the extra small adjusters, whilst the small one can actually build the medium adjusters. So if we just go and look in recipes right now and type in adjusters, you can see, there we go, that it builds the medium adjuster. Now we'll come back to the assembly lines in a minute. It was just to explain the various sizes. Now what's going to happen is we have to basically go from having some basic ore, which I've got somewhere in this container here, there we go. So going from our tier 1s and tier 2 ores, and then building up from there. Now obviously you can use the tier 3s and tier 4s, but for the factory that we're going to build today, we actually only need all of the tier 1s, and then the tier 2s, which are malachite and limestone, which create, if I remember rightly, limestone creates your calcium, and then malachite creates your copper. And so those are the only ones that you actually need to build everything that's in the factory that you see here. So what we're going to do is first of all, we're going to just pop down a type of element. So the very first thing that we need is we need to be able to turn all of these into our refined materials, which are your carbon, your iron, aluminium, etc. And for that, we use something called a refiner, which is right here. I've got it stuck up against the wall. So as you can see, you don't have to have everything on the ground. You can actually make best use of your factory and stick things around the wall. So let me go into build mode. There we go, that's my refiner all ready to go. So we're going to pop this down against this back wall here. And the first thing that we're going to need to do is we're going to need to pop down some containers. So let me I like to have it this way around. No, I'm going to have that will do. Okay, so now that we've got the container, what we're going to do is we're going to use this container to input materials into the refiner. So for example, in this case, we would want to put in, wrong one again, this one. You'd want to put in, let's say, hematite, bauxite, etc., all into this container. Then we actually need to link the container to the item. So we're going to go back into build mode, and we're going to hit the 6 key. And what this does is it allows us to create a link between the container and the refiner. And as you can see now, we have a link right here. Now you can see that it says container S and refiner. So one of the very first things you're going to want to do is you're going to want to rename your containers. If we come out of this tool and we stay in build mode and right click, we can rename the element and we can call it, let's say, ore input. So let's do that, or input, without an M, and then would be preferable. There we go. And so now when we click on our links again, let me go into, there we go. You can now see that it says or input container to refiner. This will make sense in a minute because I'm going to show you exactly why in a sec. Now, the thing is that you'd want to then put something out of the refiner, which is your end product. The problem is you cannot link back to the same container that you use to input your materials in, which is a shame. Otherwise, you could just have one massive container in the center of your factory and then just link everything in and out. But no, you can't do that. You have to have a different out. So what we have to do is we have to pop down another container. So we're going to do that and pop that container there. And then we are going to link from here into there. And there we go. Now we have the basics of a factory. And obviously then we rename this to, let's go and call it refined materials. And we are good to go. So now we have an input, a refiner, and an output. And then we have both our links right here. Now the reason why we rename the containers is because if I actually show you on a factory, because we have to go in and out all the time out of containers, your factory starts to look a little bit more complicated with links all over the place. And so this is why it's good to actually name everything. So if I go to this link here, for example, you can see that's my 3D printer output that's going to my extra small assembly line. So you can kind of work out where everything is going. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove these links. So we just press the Alt key for that, and we can just remove those links, and then we'll just pick all these up. There we go, and get them out of the way. All right, brilliant. So there you go. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to do a little tour of what all these various industry elements do. So we've already discovered the refiner, and the refiner allows us to turn our basic ore into refined materials, which I've put into this container, I believe. There we go. Then what we're going to want to do is we are going to need to turn these into the smelter. So the smelter produces all your various metals, and if we actually look at this container here, I don't know if you can notice as well, what I've done is I've put my output container right next to all my various industry elements, so I know which container is associated to what just by visually looking at it. Now if we look at this one, you can see that I will make things like silicon and steel, these and AlFe alloy. All of these are made from T1 materials, duralumin, bear with me on that one, and calcium reinforced copper are made with T2 materials. All right, so now we've got our steel. From there, we can then go on to our metalworks factories, and you'll see that our metalwork factories, if we look at here, the recipes, you can see things like basic pipe requires silicon, and then if we do, let's say screws, basic screws, and there we go, you can see that it requires steel. Now I'm going to show you a tip here which is going to come in really, really important for like working out what you actually need and where things are built. Actually, no, let me just show you the other items first, and then we'll go back to that. So then up here, we've got this one here, the big long tube. That is your chemicals. So that essentially will be your fluids and plastics. So if we look here, for example, you have your plastics, you have your nitron fuels, your space fuels, and also some organic matter. Then the one that's the three small tubes, three small cylinders there with a light in the middle, and that one is your glass furnace. Notice these are all medium-sized items. And if we click on this container, you can see you can produce glass, LED, anything is essentially associated with glass. Then over on the right here, we've got this one that looks like a little airport shuttle. That one is your electronics factory. And this will produce anything that's an electronic component. And for example, you can see here we've got basic components, basic connectors, which are your wires, basic electronics, which are your circuit boards, your basic power systems, and control systems. Then generally anything that's basic is made with T1 materials, anything that's uncommon is made with T2, and then you've got rare, exotic, etc., which covers the higher grade materials. Which ones have I forgotten? Oh yeah, the 3D printer. Now the 3D printer is a little bit of an unusual one. It's a bit of a mishmash. If we just look at the actual container here, you can see essentially it's like injection molded plastics, I think is the best way of describing it. So anything that's like a casing, screens, funnily enough, basic fixations, and carbon fiber. That's an unusual one. The carbon fiber is actually made in a 3D printer. And that's going to bring me on nicely to the last one up here, which I've got my little ramp because I've got it tucked out of the way. This one up here is your nanofiber or honeycomb refinery, which creates all your nanofibers. But the thing to be aware with this is, if you could see that the minimum run you can do is 180 cubic meters, which requires 1,800 liters of plastic. Now, 180 cubic meters is a lot. It will cover, basically I could make all of these walls out of 180 cubic meters of plastic. So if you just want just a little bit here and there, I highly recommend you use your nanocrafter. This limit was imposed by the devs in order to reduce the load on the servers, and it makes it completely impractical to use now this factory unless you are producing like huge quantities. So what I would say is, for all your honeycomb, just use your nanocrafter, and then you can just produce 10 cubic meters instead of 180. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to come back here now, and I was going to show you about the tip. In fact, let me do, there we go, I'm doing this on the fly. Let's take, for example, we want to build a small container. I can tell you now, small containers are built in the medium refinery, so we're going to go to there, and you can see small containers. Now, what we can do is we can right-click on these items. So let's say I need basic component. Where do I build a basic component? Right, inspect item. You can then go to production list, and it will tell you that you need to build that in the electronics industry. And then you can also see the recipe, and we need ALFE alloy to build that. So you can do that with all the components. You can also do that in the nanocrafter. So you could just pick any old thing. So I don't know, let's pick an aileron medium. So there we go. So we can see that requires assembly line medium, and then I can just right click on any of these, and I can see that my basic mobile panel needs to be built in the metalworks industry. Basic screw, once again, is built in the metalworks industry. Now this is where we're going to come into something interesting. So if you look at inspect item on here, and we look at the recipe, you can see that it needs a basic screw. But the basic screw is made in the metalworks industry as well. And this is where you're going to end up in a situation where you're going to need to have two items of the same factory next to each other. Because we can't take the screws, so for example, if we're making the screws in this one, so I'm making pipe, let's say I was making screws in this one, the steel is coming out of here to go into the factory, but then we need to put it into another container. But we need the screws to go back into this factory to now build the next item, which was the basic hydraulics, I think. And so as a consequence of that, we need to put two units. So the idea is that this container here outputs the screws, and then because we can't feed the screws back into the item that just produced it, we have another one here, and then this one can then produce the basic hydraulics, so that's the pipes, the same principle, and then we output that into this unit. So you have kind of two tiers of metalworks. You have your tier ones, which will be things like your screws, basic pipes, and your things like frames, which are used like for containers and for a lot of other items like engines and so forth. And then you kind of have your next level, your intermediate levels, which will be basic hydraulics, which is made from items that are also made in the metalworks, which are, in this case, the pipe. Yeah, that's right, it was the mobile panel we were looking at. So the mobile panel, as you can see, requires the screw. And so therefore, you end up in a situation where it's easier to create multiple factories. There is a transfer unit, but it's extremely expensive and very limited as to what it can do. And so therefore, you're actually cheaper and easier to actually just make multiple industry factory units in order to be able to deal with that problem. And you're going to come up against this a lot in metal work. For example, if you want to create wood, you need to create that in your refinery, but wood requires carbon, so that's the same situation there. You will also find the same problem with glass. When you're trying to make LEDs, you actually need to provide glass, and so forth and so on. So the main thing is to get all of these units and just get singles of everything, at the beginning, doubles of your metalworks, and then you are pretty much good to go. So then, apart from the large, with the medium, this is the most important one, because with the medium is where you can make all of your items. So you can see, in fact, if we just go to industry, so we go to elements and we go to industry and infrastructure, industry. There we go. You can see your 3D printer, your medium assembly line, large assembly line, chemical industry, glass furnace, all of them are all made in the assembly line medium. So this is basically what you need to get up and running. Once you get to this point, everything you see in this factory, you can build with everything that is in this factory. And so from here on, you can just keep scaling up and up and up. Then you can treat yourself to the large so that you can get your medium containers, which you will start to need once you start to produce a lot of items. The small containers won't do the job, and you will be upgrading to the mediums. The assembly line large as well can do things like the large hover engines, the large atmospheric engines for when you scale up. So there you go. So I think that pretty much covers everything. Obviously, if I thought missed something, then please do put it in the comments if you're familiar with this kind of technique. I hope you found that useful. In the next episode, we are going to be covering a hover hauler. So we're going to be using a small container with a hover hauler so that you're going to mine more, because you're going to need to feed your factory with lots and lots of ore. And so the next stage is to go from your small speeder that you upgraded up to a hover hauler that's going to be able to carry about 20,000 litres of materials, which is a lot better, so you can actually do a lot more mining in one go. All right, so that's going to wrap it up there. I hope you enjoyed that. Please give me a like if you did. Dislike if you didn't, that's fine too. Please subscribe. Hit the bell icon to get notifications, as I am producing dual universe material on a regular basis, as well as other sci-fi basic content. I have a Discord channel which is linked below. If you're interested in multiplayer games, then I also stream, and we organise that through the Discord, and that can be Space Engineers, Deep Rock Galactic, Planet 4. I will be streaming Dual Universe in the future if I'm not doing it already, because you may be watching this video a little bit further down the line. And that's it. All right, I think I've talked enough. Thank you for watching. Until the next one. Bye.